and you hear it, you're just outright disobedient. Once spiritually awake, but now practically asleep. That's what's happening to Jonah here. One called of God, now sleeping on the job, sleeping on the mission. By the way, you do know you don't have to board a ship to run from God, right? You don't have to board a plane to get outside of His will. In fact, you can remain right here within the borders of our city, within the confines of our county, never leave the city, and still run from God. And let me tell you one of the easiest ways to do that: get involved with church stuff. And we want you to be involved in the life of the church, but it's real easy to hide from God doing churchy things. You know, we come, we gather, we have our Bible studies, we have our activities, our fellowships, and it's real easy for us to sort of lull ourselves to sleep doing all this church activity, most of which we are prayerfully trying to use to direct you to where God is calling you and me to be, out into the community as disciples of Christ, bearing witness into our community. But we can mask the true heart and our level of awakeness by being busy within the context of the church. And it can give the appearance that you're spiritually awake, but while you're actually asleep spiritually. Cold and indifferent, even as the storm builds around you. Wonder if that's true of someone here. Could it be true of you? Ask yourself about your current state, the state of your spirit. Have you grown spiritually indifferent? Have you slipped a little bit in your walk with the Lord, slipping back into sin and rebellion? Have you stumbled into faith and not recovered? Ask yourself, am I spiritually cold to the Lord and His mission? If the answer is yes to any of these things, then you're probably sleeping on the Lord, sleeping on the mission. And one of the things I found interesting in the story was the interaction between the captain and Jonah. The captain, one of the mariners, when he goes to Jonah, the ship's captain goes to him, and all the sailors, as we've read, they're all crying to their gods. They have their own gods that they believe in, and so just to make sure that everybody is doing all that they can, the captain chases down Jonah, finds him sleeping in the inner part of the ship, and wakes him up and calls him to call on his God as well. But he didn't think that Jonah's God would be any different from theirs, probably. But just in case, in fact, you'll see in verse 6, the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean you sleep? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish." And you know what this tells me? The fact that this man is not quite sure about anything about Jonah and his background, this tells me up to this point that Jonah had been basically hiding his identity. Remember, Jonah's one of the minor prophets. He's got a book in the Bible named after him, right? We know him. He's famous from our perspective in the Scriptures, but he is a nobody on this ship, and Jonah is doing nothing to make known who he is. He's trying to stay anonymous, not acting like the prophet that's called of God. He's keeping his mouth shut and minding his own business. And so the captain doesn't go to him and say, "Hey, we know that you are the prophet of the living God. Please call out to the God, the living God that you believe in." He's pretty much saying, pray to your God, whoever that God may be. So Jonah is not making known, even in this moment, even though he's not willing to go to Nineveh to make known the one true God, on this ship as he's fleeing, he's keeping that news to himself as well. But let me tell you, if you're living your life in such a way that no one can identify you with the one true God, you're sleeping on the mission. Mm-hmm. If no one can look to your life and find any evidence and any indication of what God, if any God, that you believe in, something is wrong with you spiritually. But when you're walking with Christ and you're walking circumspectly in this world, people will know that something is unique and different about you. It will your very life will point others to the one true God. When I was in high school many years ago, I lived in Pensacola, Florida. And I lived just down the road from the University of West Florida. There were basketball courts up there, plenty of them. And as a high school kid who played high school basketball, in off season, we liked to go up to the college and take on the college students in a little basketball out on the outdoor basketball courts. And I was up there usually 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes more. on into the evening. One particular night, we were playing basketball, and listen, back in those days, I became a believer in Christ when I was a child at the age of 8. But as I got into my high school years, I wasn't walking with Jesus. My life, my behavior, sometimes my language didn't always reflect, Jesus was in my life and my heart. And so playing the basketball game, I was just acting like a lost kid, though I wasn't. We were playing a couple of guys. It was a friend of mine. We were playing 2-on-2 against a couple of guys on the court. And when we had a break from in between games, we went over to the water fountain, got a drink of water, and one of those guys started talking to us about Jesus. Started witnessing to me and my friend. My friend also went to church too, but we just didn't act like it. But I will tell you, I was embarrassed in that moment. There was nothing about my life, my language, anything about me in that moment on that basketball court that had reflected Jesus. And it led those guys to think, these guys need Jesus. Yeah. And I wish that I got my heart right back with the Lord in that moment. I came into conviction. It took me some time to get back to where I needed to be. But friend, I was a believer, and I had as much of a responsibility to talk to those guys about Jesus as they did to me. Yep. I was asleep on the mission. Let me ask you, are you sleeping on the Lord? I mean, He's called you. He's called me. His great commission is upon us all. Called us to be on mission for Him. But maybe for one reason or another, you don't want to do it. You're not where you need to be. And if that's the case, you're sleeping on the mission. And you know the response. You know what the response to that is? Turn the ship around. Head back to the Lord. Time to come back to God. And by all means, if He hasn't done it already, don't give Him more reason. Do not give the Lord more reason to turn the storm against you. All right.